I hope you're all still awake. You may recall this morning when I was talking, I said there were a couple of things that had really raised levels of concern in the Accreditation Committee because of COVID. And they're things that people asked us about as well. You know, what were the rules going to be with labs being closed down, online teaching and everything else? And we tried to be as supportive as possible through all of that. We basically said, tell us what you want to do, and then we'll check up on you next year. So actually, for the technical skills in particular, you will be getting or will have already had your annual review form, which very kindly tells you what you told us last year, and we want to know whether that was true or not. So we're following up on technical skills in that way. But the other area that's come up really quite seriously, and it's not just biology, it's across all the subjects, is this question of online assessment. Is online assessment going forward a good thing or not? And there are some organisations that have come out very much against online assessment. They tend to be bodies that are concerned with individual skills for students. So the General Medical Council, the Royal Vets, the General Dental, where the individual evidence of competency is very important for registration afterwards. We sent out a letter to those who asked that said, actually, online assessment should be fine. You're already looking at two different kinds of assessment. You're looking at a skills assessment, which is laboratory-based. We want to know that students have experienced that and you can evidence that. But for the rest of the assessment, it's about understanding rather than knowledge. An online assessment should be a perfectly good way of doing it. However, what I'm sure many of you have noticed is that the vast majority of academics have absolutely no idea how to write those questions. And perhaps especially if you're in a strongly research-led university, where the examiners in the final year are perhaps more focused on their research than on their students, the skills for writing assessments that test understanding rather than knowledge are perhaps not as strong as they could be. So we decided to commission some work to find out more about it, but also to produce guidance. One of the things about our accreditation system is that this is a developmental process for everybody. It's not a judgmental one. And so we like guidance, but we didn't think we were able to write the guidance. So what we did was ask David Smith, who volunteered through a full process, I have to say, that, to produce guidance for us that we could share with all of you online and in the future. And what we've done is asked him to come today to give us some background on what he's done and to talk a little bit about assessment styles for online assessment for understanding rather than knowledge. There's a long question and answer session after this if you wish to use that, so there'll be lots of opportunity to ask questions. But for now, David, I will hand over to you.
All right, hello everybody. It's a rather terrifying prospect to be given the hot topic of the day and stand up in front of everybody who knows about it and say, hey everybody, I've got the answers to online assessment, woo! I'm going to try and give you some guidance. I'm going to approach this from an evidence base. I'm going to approach this from a practice base, not just my practice. Best way to do it in a job is to outsource this to other people and collate it all together. So we're going to bring all these ideas together. We're going to share them. Hopefully then we can talk about them. There's also a terrifying, if you look at you ever get a list, right, of one of these conferences and somebody says 20 minutes of Q&A at the end after your talk, you're thinking, ooh, that's going to be a bit hard. So we're going to do that. We're going to talk through all these different things, but I'm going to let you into a little bit of a secret before we start all of this, is I was always rubbish at exams, utterly rubbish at them. I couldn't recall the knowledge, I couldn't sit down and write this stuff down. I was that student who, not only did I get the extra time, I got the extra time because I was particularly slow at writing. But then I was also put into a room by myself, not for my benefit, because I mutter when I write. And it was so I didn't give the answers away to everybody else. And so I've got this big thing about making the examinations fit for purpose, making them useful. So we're going to talk about that kind of thing. What I aimed to do when I got the brief from the RSB was to create something that is going to be of value for everybody. I wanted to build something that academics could look at, to give them ideas about how they could write questions, and I wanted that to be built upon an evidence base that wasn't just my individual practice or the individual practice of somebody else in another institution. So I've tried to be encompassing as possible in everything that I'm pulling together and all the ideas that I'm trying to pull together. And so we're going to have a look at a variety of different question styles and question types. We've spoken about loads of them today already. There's been loads of authentic assessments already demonstrated today, and the PL sessions, the problem-based learning sessions that we've just done are ideal for this. And the thing I've been thinking when we come down there is actually this isn't just about online assessment at all. This is about any time-based assessment. These types of questions is not just for the ones that are delivered via a computer. We can apply this across our programs and ideas because what we're testing is a different knowledge base and a different skill base. So that's where we're coming from in all of this, and that's where my standpoint is. Now, it's always good, though, to have an idea about where we're actually pitching ourselves. And I say when I'm presenting to my students, if you're going to put some words up, you might as well shut up and give people time to read what they are. So please read the words that are up there. I'll read them down there. So that's the definition I'm working towards for what an online examination is. We are assuming that they are open book. That is, the students have access to all of the information in the world. We're assuming they've got their phones on them. They've got access to their mates or access to a subject specialist. One of the lecturers I work with, her daughter's in exactly the same degree that she is a specialist in the same house. They've literally got a subject specialist in the kitchen. How do you answer this question on genomics, ma'am? So that's the standpoint we're going to come from. We're thinking about them in those sorts of terms. The knowledge is there and open to them, so we need to be thinking about that and have that built into our ideas and our criteria as we're going along. Got big green buttons. Okay, so what's actually the problem we're trying to address? I'll Google that one for you. If you've never used the wonderful Let Me Google That For You website, it's fantastic. When you get the little email from your students, I can't find this information, you type it in, you send them back a little link, there's a little GIF and it sends them the information. So knowledge is there, it's freely available. Pretty much everything we know, you could search up and have on your phone in what, a couple of milliseconds with the right question? So finding knowledge isn't hard. Understanding and applying knowledge, that's a little bit different. That's where things start going. So we're going to be addressing that. Knowledge is freely available. They can get to it. That's not to say that it's bad. I'm a big believer in my teaching that in biosciences, a firm underpinning, a firm knowledge base is important to be able to do all these higher order skills. And it does need to be in there. But we have to be aware in our questioning that questions can just be picked up and asked, especially in online exams. So we've got these high-stakes online exams where the knowledge can be brought together and put in. So we have to start thinking about this and how we're going to address that. Here's the other big one, everybody. We've got a problem about collusion and cheating in online exams. And I bet we've spoken to about 5 or 6, 7 people today. Everybody has said this is an issue. And it's something we need to address and think about. And when we're talking about collusion, that's basically groups of people working together to define an answer. If we're talking about cheating, what are we really talking about? Are we talking about searching a piece of knowledge and cutting and pasting that in without any internal processing? Is that what we mean by cheating? Do we mean getting somebody else to do it? And many of these problems we can address through the style of the questions we're asking and how we ask them. I'd also like to say that not all students are cheats. I'd say pretty much all of them are pretty honest people. And if we instill within our skill knowledges a firm ethical base, that sense of research integrity or sense of personal integrity, then we can start to address this in other manners, as well as proctoring, pooled questions, things that they can't then easily look up. There are other ways to do it, as well as technological solutions and innovations. So collusion is a big issue. You look at the data, you look at the papers that are published, most of them are on collusion. Very few of them are actually on assessment design, which is a bit annoying for a literature search. But I am very much aware this is a thing. So it's at the back of my head all of the time. We're going to try and address it through the way that we talk about and design our questions. I'm not going to stand up at every point and go, oh no, look, they're cheating. We're going to try and design it out and try and think about it in other ways. But it's a big caution sign, and it's not something I've brushed under the table and gone, it's a problem for everybody else. And the other thing we need to consider with this is everybody comes from a different institution. Everybody in the room probably has one of 4 or 5 VLEs. Some of us might have proctoring software. The majority of us don't. So we've got to think about this as a community, about how we can address this kind of work. Simple one-off technological solutions aren't going to work for everybody. It might work in individual places. So what did I do? I did what anybody does when they're given a topic. I Googled it. And I did a literature search. And I was sitting down there going, authentic assessment. When do I get a time-limited piece of work that I've got to produce an essay? Well, David Coates just gave me one. So I went and read, so you lot don't have to, all of the papers on online assessment and all of the papers on examinations within the biological settings, and basically for my own benefit, but then I'm going to share it with everybody else, produced a couple of page literature review on what it all said. And it was very, very enlightening about what that came and showed us. And we're going to see that embedded in specifically the checklist that I've created, which goes through the ideas and things you should be thinking about as you're going to We'll elaborate those when we get there. So there's a literature review behind all of this. You might have spotted a QR code. If anybody needs to have a little sleep on the train on the way home or later tonight, please, the queue's going to come back up later. You can read that at your content and leave little happy comments for me about how I can make it better. So, literature review is going to be there. The other thing we did was to draw case studies of practice. So, I reached out to the community and I got them to fill in a very simple little template about the type of question that they were addressing, how they were doing it, and I've collated all of those together and done a little bit of analysis to see what they're doing, and surprise, surprise, everybody's doing authentic assessment as the main means of addressing. And that all then builds into this good practice in assessment design, these ideas about how we can address this type of questions. So there we go in. Right, what's the first thing that comes out of all of this? The old style examination of everybody sits down in a room and writes on bits of paper does not port well to an online environment. I suspect you already all knew that. So we need to think differently. We need to think that what was a perfectly valid assessment style cannot directly be transitioned into the online environment, because knowledge is searchable. The students will talk to each other or may talk to each other, and the means of doing it are different. It's a different beast writing on a piece of paper as it is typing into a computer when the search engine's by the side of you. So a direct port doesn't always work. And so if we're going to change what we're going to do, we have to think about the pedagogy behind it. We need to think about why we're doing it, what it is we're assessing, and why it is we're assessing that. Now that's going to be different for everybody in this room, for everybody's modules, everybody's areas, but the thought process is the same. Why are you doing it? What is it you actually want the students to tell you when you are finished? So like-for-like replacements, I think you'll all agree, or we'll say, have had their issues. The other problem, Oh no, the other problem's not the right word, but the other consideration with knowledge-based assessments is that they're very surface level. Do you all remember cramming for an exam, going down the next day, writing it all out, leaving the room and remembering absolutely nothing? That's surface level understanding about what is going on. I did really well in electrochemistry, can't remember a single thing. So surface level approaches where knowledge is the main means of testing leads to surface understanding. We want our graduates to have a deep understanding. We want them to be able to apply what they know. We want them to be able to work with the information. We want them to be able to create. Now, where's the lady from Brunel? There she is. I'm so glad you put your Bloom's thing up a second ago and had them all mapped against all the different levels of your degree at the same time. And I was like, I have totally got that slide. Ta-da! Honestly, we didn't copy each other. This wasn't a pre-arranged thing. We will be talking, though, because... Oh, well, never mind. You can find me on Twitter. But Bloom's is common. People know about it. That's why I've picked it. Other learning theories are available. You can pick your own. This one's just one that people happen to know about. And it's broken down into all these nice little layers of knowledge and understanding and applying stuff and analysing stuff and evaluating stuff and creating stuff. And just like the talk before, those different skill sets sit well at different stages through the degree programme. So people entering a degree programme need that firm knowledge base, need that firm level of understanding and a bit of application so that we can build the skills that they're going through their second and third years, where we start applying stuff and analysing stuff, until they get to the end of the degree and we've got wonderful graduates that can create ideas and go out and solve problems and, save the world and do all the things that we want them to do. So we've broken this down, we've broken down several of the ideas in this sort of structure. I've termed it early, mid and late degree to try and take into account the different Scottish and English and Welsh systems and how they're structured. But it's basically beginning, middle and end. So our lower order thinking skills, then they are things like knowledge and understanding. They can be searched. They can be looked up. That's the problem that we can address. And there's many ways we can address it, and we'll have a look at a few of them. But the lower order skills are prone to the answers being found through searching and opening up your knowledge books, opening up your textbooks, opening up your course notes, watching that YouTube video. There's your answers. They're prone to that. That doesn't mean you can't solve it out, but they're prone to it. The higher order skills then require our students to use cognitive processing. They require them to use the information that we have been teaching them, to synthesize that information and then present it to us in different formats. So that's when we're starting to analyze spectra, design experiments, apply our knowledge to a knowledge exchange environment, all those kinds of things. That's where they start to build in. Okay. So we're going to start building them up. We're going to think about it in these different levels. But one of the first things we're going to have to do is assess them. And we need to be really canny in the way that we assess. If you're going to be assessing these higher order knowledge skills, let's be realistic, they're hard. And they're hard, and not everybody's going to get it. And you might find if you've designed your assessment such that it cannot be passed without these beautiful skills, your weaker students are going to struggle. So in your assessment designs and in the way that you're going to be marking them, be realistic about what your pass grade criteria is going to be. What actually is the minimum that student needs to progress through their degree, and do your criteria match it? And you could probably argue that the ability to find some information based upon a prompt and recall back and report back that information could actually be a pass level descriptor, especially at the early levels. At the high end, the marking criteria gets even more wonderful, because now you've got open-ended questions. There's no set answer. So how on earth do you mark something with no defined set answer? You need to be thinking about, well, is it feasible? Is it based on knowledge? Has it got a sound argument behind it? And so your criteria at the higher end start losing that ability or that specificness about what the answer is going to be, and are much more open-ended. And you're assessing, like the gentleman was talking about creativity. How on earth do you assess creativity? Well, he put the rubric up for you. That's how you do it. But same thing happens in these higher order assessment skill questions. You need to be thinking about those sorts of things. So it's careful consideration of your past descriptors and careful consideration of your high-end descriptors based on what you want your students to know will really help you out before you even start anything. So, this isn't the end, this is the checklist bit of where I got to with my literature review. There's a number of things that really popped out of the literature as being important. One of them is clarity. In an online exam, clarity is key. You don't really want to be having a question that says, choose one question from section A, 2 from section B, and a choice of 2 from B, C, or D. That's just like, well, first bit of the assessment is, can I understand the assessment rubric? So clarity in what you're doing, it's probably better to have less clear questions than many choices. And as we were talking about before, linking them across modules is a wonderful way to do that kind of stuff. Time and length are the other great things. Now, the length of the exam, well, that's up to your university. It's probably not in your control. My university has 4 hours. Sally, you have 30 hours. So neither of us control that. We were told your exam is 4 hours. I bet you were told yours is 30 hours. So we don't control that. But what we do control is what happens within those times. And if you're thinking about the time to complete an exam, let's be realistic again. If you're handwriting, how fast can you write? Have you sat down and completed your exam by hand at either a pass level or high-end descriptor? How long did that actually take you? If you're thinking about online, reading online takes more time. Many of us will have moved from traditional annotations of scripts to online marking. I bet you that took you more time to do it than it did previously. Same happens to our students. If you're thinking about typing speed, it's really hard to get good peer-reviewed metrics on how quickly people type. 1 or 2 papers that I found for a 17-year-old doing a transcription task, the average typing speed was 23 words a minute for transcription. That's sitting down and with the words and typing up. That discounts any thinking. So for a 500-word answer, you're looking at 20 minutes, just transcription typing. And if you want to get an idea, and I do love this stat, and you guys will get it. I did this my latest first years, and they didn't know what on earth I was talking about. Do you all remember the song The Proclaimers, I Would Walk 500 Miles? Yeah? Excellent, I've hit my demographic. If you include all the la-la-la-las, it's 500 words long. That's a good fact. And fits at font size 10 on a single page. So if you want to show it to your students, and they all go, what on earth is that song? You can use that one. But think about that. That's about 500 words. So that's about time. Just physically typing, it's going to take it. Now, accessibility is another real big issue. I've talked to Nigel about his students and digital accessibility. Where are they going to sit their exam? Are you going to bring them onto campus and have a room full of 200 PCs and sit them all down and do it there? Or are they doing it in the kitchen? If they're doing it in the kitchen, what's the environment around them like? Is the family there? Are they in their bedroom upstairs where they've got a nice quiet space to work? Is their Wi-Fi going to hold out long enough to get to the other end of the exam before it all keels over? So you must think about the accessibility of your students. And you know your students best, you know what they have, but do consider it. Think about the achievability. What is it you actually want them to do at the end of this? What is pass level descriptors and all of this? Think about the expectation. Do your students know what is coming? Have you prepped them for it? What's the expectation of the students when they're going in? What is your expectation of them? And then also, the cognitive level. We'll have a look at some cognitive level, but then I put in blue at the bottom down here, preparation. There's no point teaching our students to run 100 metres and then change the assessment type to a swimming gala. The strong ones will do fine, because they're strong athletes, they can just smash up. The others are going to all keel over and drown. So we need to prepare them. That means through your module, through your active learning, you're preparing for the type of assessment you're going to be doing at the end. Is it integrated? I suspect for everyone in this room, you go, yeah, it is integrated. That's good. So but do think about the preparation. And if you're using a bit of technology that might be new, have the students experience that. You don't want to be doing a Moodle quiz for a time-limited, high-stakes assessment, and the first time they've ever clicked on the button is when it's 9:30 in the morning and you click start. Prepare them. Have that built into the background. So their assessment is quite good. Think about those. There's my big tick list of things. On my little document, I've got a few more descriptions about what they all mean. All right, so what can we do? I love a multiple choice question. They're great. You can prepare students because you can have loads of them sitting on your VLA beforehand. And if you really think about the design, you can go everywhere from knowledge recall all the way up to evaluation. The only thing they really can't do is creativity, because there is a set answer. There is a right answer to them. But they can address all of those different levels. So you can have nice knowledge recall ones. You never guess I teach biochemistry. What's a single letter code for arginine, everybody? R, the pirate's favourite amino acid. So you can do knowledge recall. You can apply. You can give them sets of information to work with. I like to give my students the isoelectric point of a protein, the pH, and then ask them questions about how they're going to separate it. This is a massively great discriminator question, because you have to know two things to be able to do it. So you can apply, and you can analyse. You can put data sets in there. This is a hydrophobicity plot. You have to look at that plot, and I'm now asking you, what is the answer? You can't Google that, especially if you created the image yourself. But they are applying their knowledge. And if you write your questions right, it'll generate the little feedbacks for them with right or wrong answers. So you've got this wonderful thing that you can use over and over again, a bit of setups involved, but you can go all the way through this. You can set up question pools, and this can be done for a variety. It works really well for MCQs. Question pools work by having a variety of similar looking questions to which the students or randomly selected one of those questions from that pool. And so if you had, and I sat down and worked this out, a 30 question MCQ with 4 questions from a pool, each one randomised, you've got, what's that, 2.8 times 10 to the 17 possible exam answers. That's going to be hard to collude on. They're probably too busy trying to figure out their own answer to answer the question for their mates. So question pools work really well. It's not just MCQs, any type of question set that you can put into your VLE, you can generate a pool for. Now, I pulled this MCQ tick list off I don't know how many fall over on a flat stage, off one of the review articles that I read. And I don't agree with all of it, but it is quite useful. And it talks about setting the exam off at a set time. Everybody starts at 9:30. It says, have it open and accessible just for a limited amount of time. So once it's over, the questions are gone. Randomization of the questions is probably good. If you're doing good MCQ question design, in terms of some of your answers you might not want to be randomized because there might be a numerical order. But randomization is good. Presenting one question at a time is on the list. I personally don't agree with that. I think that has good evidence, and I've put some literature up there that stresses people out because they don't know what's coming. It might be better to see all the questions at once, but some people do say have one at a time. Designing the exam to fit within the time period. I mean, you'd want to say that was obvious, really, but make sure it can be done within the time. Single attempts. Now, single attempts is tricky because if their Wi-Fi goes down and they're logged out of all their questions, what are you going to do about that? Sometimes it's regenerate a new question database set because it's really hard to regenerate the original one based on the way that the software works. But critically, you do want to be changing a subpopulation of your questions every year. Otherwise, the same ones will get circulated around. But you don't have to do all of them. They're a bit of a pain to set up the first time, but once they're set up, change 1 or 2 questions and away you go. So MCQs are good and can be used and can be robust. For the case studies, on the document I've got at the end, you've got access to all of them. And if you're thinking, but I've got a really good idea for a case study and it's not on the list, please send me your case study and I'll put it on the list. The more we've got, the better this gets. So we've got contributors from all over the country. I mined the Bioscience Education Network group to do this. It's one of the Hub's sponsored group, and it's like-minded teaching focused academics. It's basically a support network for all of us, and they've supplied these question basis forms. So we've got them from all over the place. And so what I've done is to organise these in what appears to be the levels at which they've been delivered to the students. So we've got some examples from the early stages, some from the mid stages, and some from towards the end. The big thing in all of this, when you look at them all as a group, they're all authentic assessments. Now, authentic assessment, we've had, how many talks we had today, David? Like 6 or 7, loads of them. Pretty all of them had some form of authenticness in them. So we're already all doing it. The authentic assessment approach in a number of different papers was shown to reduce the collusion because it's the student's own work. And it's based, and they're seeing the reality of it, and they're putting it into practice. So it's really hard to, it limits that collusion that's going on. So it has been seen to reduce that kind of collusion aspect. So they're all forms of authentic assessment. I'm going to show you a couple of examples so you get a flavour of what's there. You will have access to all of these when they go onto the RSB website. I'm going to give you a QR code at the end so you can go and have a look and you can help me critique it, and if there's things missing, you can help me add them in. But there are questions for first and second years based around understanding. This one's one of mine, and I love this question because it gets over my ability to spot errors in the exam. Have you all had that moment when you go into the massive exam hall and the chief invigilator goes, please turn to question 32 and correct the spelling error in question 3. And you're like, oh man, that's mine again. All right, so this is a spot the error question, and it can't be Googled because what we're asking the students to do is to look at a peptide that I've created. I've deliberately made errors in there, and the question is, what are the errors? You don't have to answer this right now, but if you want to, you can. I mean, I've labelled the terminal wrong for a start, and the charges are off. But you have to apply your knowledge to do that. You can automate this question. So if you wanted to have it inside a test, it will self-mark, which is great. And you can pool bank them. So you can have 20 of them, everybody gets a different one. And there's a number of different examples up there about those sort of understanding based. But we're asking students to apply rules and use and think about their knowledge a little bit. There's analysis questions. We had talk today about doing data analysis. We can do data analysis within an exam. This is James's question. He's asking the students to identify the secondary structural types within a spike protein. Look at the image, apply your knowledge, tell me what is going on. Tell me about the conformational changes that you can observe. So we're breaking the information down, we're analysing data sets, and we can give spectra and give whatever we like to our students to analyse. Case studies are fantastic. They take a bit of reading, so you do need to factor in how long it will take for your students to read through a case study, but you present them with a situation and ask them to apply their knowledge to solve the problems within that case study. So this is a bioethics. This is Stephanie's question. And I've put the ... because the text is longer than we fit onto here. But basically, it sets out an ethical scenario that the students might face and asks them what their responses would be and asks them to think about how they would approach it. So they're applying to a bioethics environment. So we're asking students to appraise, to choose, to justify their answers. This is a production question, which at least 3 of the examples had, and it is to rework knowledge to produce a new piece or a new artifact. So examples have been figures. Here is a body of information. Draw the summary figure. That is your assessment. You can't Google the summary figure because it doesn't exist. They have to create it themselves. Write the abstract for a piece of work. Create the lay description for a methodology. All of that requires you to use the information you've got and produce it and synthesize it and give it into a new way. And then finally, you have things like assessment, experimental design questions. So experimental design was in at least 2 of the talks earlier today. This is one of mine. I give them the last paragraph of the paper, which nearly always has the, this is what we should do next. And so you ask the students, what should they do next? Cross-program talk. Where was the cross-program talk? It's gone. You just spoke about the last one a minute ago. They have to draw on everything they know to answer that question. And it's about experimental design. They have to, feasibility, is it possible? Can this experiment be done? You can't just say, oh, I'll use this magic kit and it'll tell me the answer. Everything needs to be feasible, but it needs to be generated by the students. So they're synthesizing and creating information. So as a summary then, online exams can be written to prevent that searching problem. We can write them in a way that will achieve our full range of educational goals if we sit down and think about it. We need to be mindful and considerate about the accessibility and the achievability of the exam. They should be authentic as possible. We want to be applying our knowledge. We want to be analysing stuff. We want to be evaluating. We want to solve problems. And I'm not going to shy away from it. Collusion is still an issue. But if we've considered it and brought about it and thought about it, we've made a start. So, all these people have given me case studies. I want more case studies. I can never have enough data and enough information. So if you've got a case study and you want it shared, email me and I'll put yours onto the list. I'll open myself up to the lion's den now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. As David said, once we've got the report and the guidance finished, we'll put that all available on the RSB website. And for me, the key thing is about leading me through the best way to write questions at the different levels. So, questions, comments, additions, executions, hands up.
All stunned in silence.
There is a bit of a stunned silence. Over here, where's the microphone? The microphone is rushing towards you.
That's brilliant, thank you. And I'm going to read that on the train and I'm not going to fall asleep and it's going to be amazing. Thank you. Because we have got proctoring. We are using Moodle, Moodle quizzes, and we have to put questions on separate pages, and I don't know if anyone else has had this problem because sometimes you get kicked out and then the proctoring software kicks you out big time, and then there are students on the phone crying that their lives are over, and it turns out that every time you change the page you auto-save what you did before. So that might be why they're saying put it on a different page, just to stop technology getting in the way of the exam itself. So I don't know if anyone else has got a solution to that problem that isn't put it on a different page and tell them to change page.
I don't have the answer to that question.
And the other thing that occurred to me is that on the one hand, we've got students going, I don't want to do group work. I'm much better on my own. And then when it comes to the exam, we've got collusion. And I feel like, is that Marmite? I don't know. I just feel like, is there somehow we can harness that wanting to work together in an assessment?
You could write your question to be that way. In a way, when we write, this isn't an online test exam, this is one where I get my students to write just a straight lab report in the style of a paper, knowing fine well that they're going to work together. So I asked them to write the names across the top of all the students that are on it as if it was an author's list. You could do that. But if you are going to do that, you need to be very, very mindful, because not everybody has a supportive peer group. You will end up, there will be students who are isolated and don't have anybody to draw on, and they're going to be challenged. I mean, yeah, for every one of these, there's always a counter, isn't there? But yeah.
I just sort of wanted to throw that out there, really, because it just hit me. And we also had a situation where the Turnitin software picked up Collusion, but it wasn't. It was just that the two students had studied together, and it was pretty much what the lecturer had said, and they had memorised it, even though it wasn't a knowledge-based question.
So I had this conversation, I was talking to John earlier about it, and I don't know about everybody else, but when we were on paper, if you had an exam answer that was more or less the bullet-pointed questions from your slides written down, you would have gone, well, at least they've remembered it, pass. That would be a thing. I'll tell you another little story. I was once brought up for collusion in my first year for a lab report, and it's because me and my mate sat in the same room and discussed the lab and all the data that we gathered. And of course our data looked the same. So, we're not monsters. We need to be open, and we need to think this through. We need to be sensible. Applying strict rules is never really going to work. I think we have to use our best judgment.
I really liked your question with the deliberate mistakes in.
All's good.
And for that kind of question, if a student has got a free text answer and they list a lot of things, do you negative mark for the things which are wrong? And do you tell the students how many marks are available for that kind of question?
Yeah, so the answer is yes, I do. Especially, actually in the self-marked one, I list, when it's self-marked, I list 8 possible answers, and that is negatively marked, because you could tick everything, and in which case, if you did that, you'd get 0, because you've just ticked everything, and that's that sort of, in your criteria, we often get questions where there's like a brain dump. Every piece of information has been dumped down on a piece of paper. It's not been synthesized and thought about and talked about. And so they know a lot of stuff, but they can't apply it. So they've not applied the knowledge. They've just written everything down. And so they've not clearly identified the error by just going, it's that. So yeah.
It's just that quite a lot we are told by external examiners and stuff that we need to tell students. Yeah, I did. I was your external examiner. But we tend to encourage teaching staff to tell the students how much of a mark something is worth, so they can allocate their time and their effort accordingly. But this is kind of going against that a little bit.
Well, I mean, for that question, I give them 2 marks because there's 2 errors in there, but there's 8 potential options. So, if you were to handwrite it, you might, if it was going to be handwritten, you would say, there are 2 errors in this question. What are they? That's how you do it. Just be upfront.
Thanks very much. I really feel like I'm going to do a much better job than the very poor job I've done in the past with online design. So thanks very much. However, you knew there was a however coming.
There's always a however.
Nice bit. I don't know if others in the room will agree, but I think there exists a sort of sector expectation for certain things. And one of those things is a intro methods results discussion lab report. And a worry with relying overly on Turnitin and things with something like that is the methods section is going to be the same, or should be, across the whole cohort, because they've all employed the same methods. So in places where I'm not basing it on a lab report, these kind of online things seem fantastic, but I don't think, maybe you're not advocating this, but I think it's important as well to also cater for those kind of, whether they're employer or sector expectations, that a graduate will be able to write a lab report on an experiment that they've done. And that maybe isn't applicable to an online kind of format.
No. So it comes back to what's the assessment for, and is it the assessment appropriate for the skill that you are judging? And if you're designing that type of assessment and you put in an exam and he's looking at it going, this isn't right. It's probably not right. It probably should be somewhere else in your programme. Exams have their place. I'm not great on exams. I don't think everybody should be doing them. You can have wonderful programmes with none. You have wonderful programmes with hundreds. Is it right for the skill that you're assessing is the question one should ask themselves. And if it is, and it is appropriate, then it's the right thing to do. And if you look at it and go, actually, why am I asking them to do this in a time-limited way where in the workplace, when they're out in a research lab, in the field, in industry, in a writing house, they would have 3 weeks for it? Well, it's probably not the right assessment. So that's really that sort of thought process. Is it appropriate?
Yeah, and kind of, is it appropriate maybe to overly rely on software like Turnitin for something where something that includes a methods section where by its nature
they are always the same.
Similar, yeah. Okay, thanks.
Come to the back first.
Thank you. I was just going to partly respond to Richard because as somebody who has the unenviable joy of reading every single student misconduct case in our faculty, I think with things like methods and Turnitin or whatever software you use, there has to be an element of academic judgment as to whether or not that needs referring or whether it is simply there are only so many ways to say we put the cells in a tube and put them in the centrifuge, and you just have to live with that.
Totally agree.
So where you've got the option of using multiple multiple access to questions, why don't we just let the students download their personal question paper? Then you haven't got to worry about Wi-Fi, haven't got to worry about environment, and that sounds like a lovely option. People can download it if they need to make the font bigger, change the colours, put screens across it for visual impairment. They can do it, and then they just submit it by the deadline.
Exactly, and if you've got a technology system that allows you to do that, then why not? My level 5 secondary exam that I just did, a part of my preparation, my personal preparation was, if the student's Wi-Fi goes down, what on earth am I going to do in this time-limited exam for that individual person? So I had a couple of questions. I opened it up, it pulled it all off, I printed them off, put them into a PDF file on the side of me, just in case. Then I had the secondary thought, if the Wi-Fi goes down, how on earth are they going to email to ask me for the question? But they were, as a backup plan. So, you could do that. And I've seen it done in a number of different assessments where people generate huge data sets, where each student gets their own individual data set for exactly that reason. Clever use of R.
Okay, my short question is, how big a cultural shift is this? Now let me explain what I'm getting at, because your presentation is wonderful and it's great and it covered assessment, but of course assessment is only a component of the whole teaching process. If we're honest with ourselves, we can all admit, can't we, that it's pretty easy to teach some knowledge, facts, and then simply set an exam question and you can test whether the student can reproduce those facts. It's very easy to do, and there's still a lot of teaching that is based on that, even at level 6. So if we assume that this kind of assessment is here to stay, how big a cultural shift is this, not only in how we assess, but also how we teach and how we work out what we want our students to know?
It's huge.
Yes.
Huge.
And is it going to happen?
I think, I'd hope so. We would like our students to be able to apply and do all these skills that we want. And if we want that, then that is something that we as a community would have to do. Otherwise, we are deciding as a community that actually teaching them a load of stuff and allowing an exam or setting exams where that kind of knowledge is what we want. So as it is for us to decide that. So yes, it is huge. It is a different way of teaching. There's a lot of preparative work that has to go in prior to all of this. For some of us, it's so much easier just to teach something, write something, set a question, tell me what I just said to you. That is not easy. It's not easy, it's not the right word. It can be done. So yes, it's a huge difference. And it's not easy. It will take change, and might not necessarily always be comfortable for us, but it's worth doing.
Julia wants to ask a question, but we're coming to the end of the time.
It's not a question, David, it's just a comment. Okay. And it's related to really what Robert was saying and asking his question. Can everyone hear me? Just coming off of a few accreditations, some of the comments that came back from students who had been used to doing open books and then suddenly being put back onto exams was they hated it.
Yeah,
they wanted the open books. They were pressurizing the teachers, the staff, to actually keep the open book. So I think the question is it going to happen? I think there will be, it looks like there's going to be a wave from students wanting this type of assessment more than a written exam. And my last comment, because I know David wants to go and get settled in to a hotel and have a drink. I shouldn't say that, should I? I like the comment that you said at the very beginning, which is define what your problems and what the question is that you want to ask. And that is essential, and I think that's an essential thing to everything we've talked about today, whether it be problem solving, whether it be looking at creativity, whether it's been looking at any of the criteria that we use in accreditation. If you're setting up something, think what you want it to do, and then set it up according to that, rather than to what you might think it should be.